In this video, I'm going to be showing you a quick and easy method on how to take into account significant figures when adding or subtracting. In the previous video, I just talked about counting significant figures in general. So by looking at a number, you could easily determine how many significant figures are in that specific number given the amount of digits or decimal places, etc. Now, in this video, we're going to be talking about when adding or subtracting these two different values, how can you determine how many significant figures the final answer or final value will have. This can be easily determined through the rule given for adding or subtracting two different numbers with significant figures, which is when you are adding or subtracting two different values together or two or more values, the final answer should exhibit the least number of decimal places in the original values in the given problem. So if you had 5.0 plus 3.15, you would take the 5.0 and you would use only one decimal place in your final answer, because that is 5.0 just has one decimal place, and that is the least number of decimal places from those two original numbers used in the problem. Now this rule is different than if you are multiplying or dividing two different numbers. So addition and subtraction have this rule where you take least number of decimal places, while multiplying and dividing take the least number of sig figs in general, which there will be a video I will make on that very soon, so keep an eye out for that. But when adding or subtracting two values, you will use this rule of the least number of decimal places. So since there's that difference in rules, we're going to look at a few of examples and practice problems to really understand this rule and apply it for these problems. Now let's hop into a few examples to just really see how this rule works. So when we're adding or subtracting two different values, or two or more, which we'll hit on later in this video, we need to look for the least number of significant figures given the values of the problem. So let's say we're looking for how far a person drove between two trips in their car. On the first trip, when driving from their house to the first store, it took them 7.8 miles to get between the two. And that was the first trip. On the second trip, they only drove from one store to another, so it only took them 2.20 miles. Now, we want to find out between these two values, how many miles did they drive between these two trips. So, to figure these out, we would add up these values. And when you add up these values, you end up getting 10.05. However, this is not consistent with the rule of significant figures that we talked about when adding or subtracting significant figures, because this 10.05 here does not take the least number of decimal places that this 7.8 has. Because of this, we need to round this 10.05 to be consistent with the 0.8 up here, which is one decimal place. So to do that, this 0.05 would then go to 0.1. So then your final answer for the total distance traveled between these two trips would be 10.1. And as you can see, this answer is consistent because 7.8 is the least number of decimal places, which has one decimal place, and 10.1 has one decimal place here in that 0.1, so your answer then is correct. Now let's look at an instance in where there's more than two values being added or subtracted. In this problem, we have a popsicle that weighs 20.07 grams. And we are going to be calculating the mass of it as it melts over a period of 3 hours. In the first hour, or after 1 hour, it lost 2.8 grams. In the second hour, it lost 3.79 more grams. Then, during that final hour, it lost 5.65 grams. So it slowly began to lose more and more mass. Now, when looking at this problem, we technically have 4 different values involved. We have the original value and then 3 different masses being subtracted from that original value there. So, by looking at these values, we can see that this 2.8 here, this first mass, lost from the original mass of the popsicle has the least number of decimal places, as this 0.8 is only one decimal place compared to 0.07, 0.79, and 0.65 down here. Because of this, our final answer, which we would subtract all these values, is going to exhibit only one decimal place. So, when you originally subtract all these values out, you get 7.83 grams as your final answer. However, remember, we need to get it down to one decimal place to be consistent with this rule of significant figures. So this 7.83 would not work as our final answer for the mass of this popsicle after these 3 hours of melting. What the correct answer would be taking this 7.83 and getting it down to just one decimal place, which would result in the final answer of 7.8 grams as your final answer with just one decimal place. Okay, and that wraps this video up about adding and subtracting significant figures. I hope this was a great help to understanding this concept. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to like or subscribe, and I will see you in the next video over dividing and multiplying with significant figures.